The morning sun painted the Caribbean waters in brilliant shades of turquoise and gold as the Coast Guard cutter approached what should have been empty ocean. Instead, they found something that would rewrite maritime history and send shockwaves through the sailing community worldwide. Floating perfectly upright, its sails neatly furled, was the 42-foot yacht Serendipity, completely intact, completely abandoned, and completely impossible to explain. The crew was nowhere to be found. No distress signals had been sent, no storms had passed through the area. Yet 3 experienced sailors had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind a mystery that would connect dozens of similar disappearances spanning 3 decades. This isn't just another tale of the sea claiming its victims. This is the story of a pattern so subtle, so insidious, that it went unnoticed for years, while claiming life after life. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about maritime safety and reveal a killer hiding in plain sight aboard vessels around the world. By the end of this story, you'll understand why experienced sailors, people who've weathered storms, navigated treacherous waters, and lived their entire lives on the ocean, are disappearing without a trace, and why the one mistake they all made could happen to anyone who underestimates the sea's most silent predator. The protagonists of our story were far from amateur weekend sailors. Captain James Morrison, 62, had spent 40 years navigating everything from racing yachts to cargo ships across the Atlantic. His weathered hands bore the scars of countless rope burns, and his steel-grey eyes held the wisdom of someone who'd seen the ocean in all its moods. Beside him was Dr. Sarah Chen, a marine biologist whose brilliant mind had earned her recognition from National Geographic for her groundbreaking research on deep-sea ecosystems. At 55, she'd spent more time underwater than most people spend in their cars. The third crew member was Marcus Rodriguez, 38, a professional yacht captain who'd guided millionaires' vessels through the Mediterranean, Pacific, and Atlantic without incident for over 15 years. These 3 had come together for what should have been the sailing adventure of a lifetime. For 5 years, they'd planned an ambitious research expedition that would combine James's navigation expertise, Sarah's scientific knowledge, and Marcus's technical sailing skills. Their dream was to document the migration patterns of deep-sea creatures across the Caribbean Triangle, a project that Sarah hoped would culminate in a documentary that could change marine conservation efforts forever. The preparation had been meticulous, almost obsessive in its attention to detail. James had spent 2 years retrofitting Serendipity with the latest navigation equipment, including dual GPS systems, satellite communication arrays, and weather monitoring devices that could predict storms hours before they formed. Sarah had invested $30,000 of her own money in specialized underwater photography equipment and research tools. Marcus had overseen the installation of redundant safety systems, life rafts, emergency beacons, water purification systems, and enough emergency supplies to last 6 months at sea. They'd completed advanced survival courses together, practiced emergency drills until they could execute them blindfolded, and even brought aboard a prototype communication system that could broadcast their location to satellites every 15 minutes. Their families joked that they'd prepared for everything short of an alien invasion. The yacht itself had been surveyed, certified, and deemed seaworthy by 3 independent marine inspectors. Insurance companies had signed off on the voyage without hesitation. Every box on every safety checklist had been marked with confidence. The first 6 months of their expedition exceeded even their wildest expectations. They documented 17 previously unknown species of deep-sea jellyfish, captured footage of whale migrations that contradicted established scientific understanding, and built a reputation among the Caribbean sailing community as the crew who'd combined adventure with legitimate scientific discovery. James's daily log entries read like love letters to the sea, filled with descriptions of perfect sailing conditions and successful research dives. Sarah's scientific journals overflowed with detailed observations and excitement about potential Nobel Prize-worthy discoveries. Marcus's maintenance log showed a vessel operating at peak performance, every system functioning flawlessly. Other sailors they encountered in ports from Barbados to Jamaica spoke of them with admiration and perhaps a touch of envy. Here was a crew living the dream that so many weekend sailors fantasized about. Unlimited time, unlimited resources, and the skills to make it all work. They'd weathered 3 tropical storms with ease, navigated treacherous reef systems without incident, and established themselves as the kind of sailors that others aspired to become. But beneath this veneer of success, something subtle was beginning to change. James's log entries, initially filled with technical precision and nautical poetry, began to include small inconsistencies, compass readings that didn't quite match GPS coordinates, weather observations that seemed slightly off from what satellite data suggested. Sarah's research notes, typically organized with scientific rigor, started containing gaps, missed observations, incomplete data sets, measurements that didn't align with established patterns. Most telling of all were the changes in their communication patterns with the outside world. Weekly check-ins with the Coast Guard, initially clockwork precise, began arriving hours late. Video calls with family members, once lengthy and filled with detailed stories of their adventures, became shorter and more vague. Marcus's girlfriend in Miami noticed that he seemed distracted during their satellite phone conversations, often forgetting details they'd discussed just days earlier or asking questions about things she'd already told him. The last confirmed contact came on a Tuesday morning in October. James radioed the Coast Guard to report their position, approximately 200 miles southeast of Nassau, and mentioned they were preparing for a deep-sea research dive in an area where the ocean floor dropped to over 8,000 feet. His voice was calm, professional, and gave no indication of distress. The weather was perfect, he reported. Light winds, calm seas, and unlimited visibility. They expected to be in the area for several days, he said, and would check in as scheduled on Friday morning. Friday came and went without contact. Saturday's silence prompted the Coast Guard to begin routine inquiries with other vessels in the area, but no one had seen Serendipity. By Sunday, a full-scale search and rescue operation was underway, with aircraft and ships combing thousands of square miles of ocean. The search continued for 10 days, covering an area larger than most states, but found nothing. No debris, no oil slicks, no emergency beacons, no trace that the yacht had ever existed. Then, on the 11th day, a fishing vessel spotted something impossible. Serendipity was floating serenely in crystal-clear water, her white hull gleaming in the afternoon sun as if she'd just left the marina. The sails were properly furled and secured, the deck was clean and organized, and every piece of equipment was in its proper place. The engines were off but functional, the fuel tanks were 3/4 full, and the fresh water tanks showed adequate supplies for several more weeks at sea. The Coast Guard boarding party found a scene that defied explanation. Coffee cups sat on the galley table, still containing liquid that couldn't have been there long. Sarah's research equipment was set up on deck as if she'd been preparing for a dive. Marcus's navigation charts were spread across the chart table with course lines drawn in fresh pencil. James's captain's log was open to a page dated just 2 days prior, describing routine maintenance and noting that all systems were operating normally. But the crew was gone, not just missing, completely vanished as if they'd never existed. Their personal belongings remained undisturbed in their cabins. Their life jackets hung in their designated spots. The emergency life raft was still secured in its housing, untouched. Most mysteriously, the yacht's sophisticated tracking system showed no gaps in its data. According to the electronic record, Serendipity had been sailing normally right up until the moment the fishing vessel spotted her, but the GPS track showed impossible navigation patterns that no human could have programmed or executed. The initial investigation focused on the obvious possibilities. Piracy was ruled out because nothing had been stolen and there was no evidence of struggle. Mechanical failure couldn't explain why they would abandon a perfectly functioning vessel. Weather hadn't been a factor, Satellite data confirmed calm conditions for the entire period. The theory that they'd been rescued by another vessel collapsed when extensive interviews with every ship and aircraft in the area turned up no sightings. As investigators dug deeper into the case, they began uncovering a pattern that had gone unnoticed for decades. The database searches revealed 17 other cases in the Caribbean alone, where experienced sailors had vanished from seaworthy vessels under similar circumstances. The MV Wanderer in 1998 found drifting with no crew, all systems operational. The catamaran Twin Dreams in 2003, discovered with breakfast still warm on the table and no sign of its two occupants. The racing yacht Storm Chaser in 2011, located with its sails properly set but empty, of the 4 expert sailors who'd been aboard just hours earlier. Each case shared disturbing similarities. All involved experienced sailors, not weekend amateurs. All occurred in deep water areas where the ocean floor dropped to thousands of feet. All left behind vessels in perfect condition with no evidence of struggle, emergency, or deliberation. Most unnervingly, all had involved crews who'd reported increasingly subtle navigational inconsistencies and communication difficulties in the weeks leading up to their disappearances. The breakthrough came when investigators obtained access to Serendipity's black box, a sophisticated data recording system that tracked everything from engine performance to crew movement patterns. The data revealed something that maritime experts initially refused to believe. For the final 3 weeks of the voyage, the yacht had been operating under the influence of magnetic anomalies so subtle that they wouldn't register on standard compass systems, but significant enough to gradually affect the crew's spatial orientation and decision-making capabilities. The ocean floor beneath their research area contained massive deposits of magnetite and other ferrous minerals that created localized magnetic fields strong enough to interfere with the human brain's natural navigation systems. Over time, prolonged exposure to these magnetic anomalies had caused a condition known as magnetic disorientation syndrome, a newly recognized phenomenon where the brain's ability to process spatial relationships and maintain situational awareness becomes progressively impaired. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a neurologist specializing in environmental impacts on brain function, was brought in to analyze the evidence. Her findings were revolutionary and terrifying. The magnetic fields in these deep water areas, she explained, operate at frequencies that directly interfere with the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for spatial memory and navigation. Unlike sudden dramatic effects, this interference builds gradually over weeks or months, creating subtle changes in perception that victims don't even notice until it's too late. Imagine your brain's GPS system slowly losing calibration, Dr. Warren explained in her official report. At first, you might misremember where you put your keys, or struggle to recall whether you turned left or right at a particular intersection. But over time, the disorientation becomes more profound. You lose track of up and down, of forward and backward. Eventually, you can't distinguish between the deck of your boat and the surface of the water. The medical evidence painted a horrifying picture of Serendipity's final days. James, Sarah, and Marcus hadn't been killed by storms or pirates or mechanical failure. They'd been victims of their own brain's gradual betrayal. The magnetic anomalies had slowly eroded their ability to perceive reality accurately until they could no longer distinguish between the safety of their yacht and the deadly embrace of the ocean depths. Analysis of the yacht's movement patterns revealed the truth. In their final hours, the crew had been attempting to navigate using visual references that their compromised brains could no longer process correctly. The GPS track showed impossible maneuvers, loops and spirals that suggested they believed they were sailing toward land when they were actually heading into open ocean, or thought they were avoiding obstacles that existed only in their magnetically addled minds. The final piece of the puzzle came from Serendipity's underwater cameras, which had continued recording automatically. The footage showed all 3 crew members, Sometime around dawn on their final day, calmly and deliberately entering the water wearing only light clothing. They weren't panicking or responding to any emergency. In their magnetically disrupted state, they had become convinced that the water was solid ground, that they could simply step off the yacht and walk to safety. The video timestamp showed they'd entered the water in the deepest part of the Caribbean basin, over 8,000 feet of ocean beneath them. Their bodies, weighted down by the water they'd inhaled while trying to breathe what their brains perceived as air, had sunk beyond any possibility of recovery. The yacht, with its autopilot engaged and sails properly trimmed, had continued sailing for days until fuel ran low and she drifted to where the fishing vessel found her. This revelation forced maritime authorities to re-examine hundreds of unexplained sailing disappearances dating back 50 years. The pattern became undeniable once they knew what to look for. Every case occurred in areas of the ocean where geological surveys later revealed significant magnetic mineral deposits. Every disappearance followed weeks or months of subtle navigational difficulties and communication problems. Every vanishing involved experienced sailors who should have known better than to abandon seaworthy vessels. The magnetic anomaly theory explained other long-standing maritime mysteries. The Bermuda Triangle's reputation for disappearances aligned perfectly with massive magnetite deposits on the ocean floor. Similar disappearance clusters in the Pacific, Mediterranean, and North Atlantic all corresponded to areas where geological surveys found significant magnetic mineral concentrations. More disturbing still was the discovery that commercial shipping companies had been quietly avoiding these areas for decades without understanding why. Captains reported that their crews became difficult or unreliable when sailing through certain regions, leading to informal industry guidelines that steered traffic away from what they called problem waters. The sailing community, with its emphasis on adventure and exploration, had never developed similar avoidance protocols, leaving recreational vessels vulnerable to these invisible killers. The implications extended far beyond sailing. Military submarines operating in these areas had reported unexplained crew psychological incidents. Commercial fishing fleets had experienced mysterious disappearances of crew members who'd simply vanished from their vessels overnight. Even aircraft flying over these magnetic anomaly zones at low altitudes had documented cases of pilot disorientation leading to crashes in calm weather. Dr. Warren's research team launched an intensive study mapping every known magnetic anomaly in the world's oceans and correlating them with unexplained disappearances. Their findings suggested that over 3,000 maritime disappearances in the past century could be attributed to magnetic disorientation syndrome. The death toll from this previously unknown phenomenon rivaled that of hurricanes and storms. The maritime industry's response was swift and comprehensive. New regulations required all vessels operating in deep water to carry magnetic field detectors and to avoid areas where readings exceeded safe thresholds. Satellite navigation systems were upgraded to include magnetic anomaly warnings. Most importantly, sailing schools began teaching recognition of early magnetic disorientation symptoms, the subtle navigation errors, communication difficulties, and perceptual changes that preceded total cognitive collapse. James, Sarah, and Marcus had made only one fatal mistake, the same mistake that had killed dozens of other experienced sailors before them. They'd assumed that their expertise, their preparation, and their technology made them invulnerable to the ocean's dangers. They'd never considered that the greatest threat might come not from storms or equipment failure, but from the gradual betrayal of their own minds by invisible forces lurking in the depths beneath their keel. Their deaths weren't in vain, though their story serves as a stark reminder that the ocean still holds mysteries capable of claiming even the most prepared and experienced sailors. The magnetic anomaly zones have been mapped and marked, but new threats undoubtedly await discovery in the vast, unexplored reaches of our planet's waters. The sea, as always, keeps some secrets while reluctantly surrendering others. And every sailor who ventures beyond the safety of harbor must remember that confidence and preparation, while essential, are never guarantees against the unknown dangers that lurk beneath the waves. The one fatal mistake that connects dozens of unsolved sailing disappearances wasn't ignorance or recklessness. It was the assumption that we understand all the ways the ocean can kill us. Today, maritime authorities maintain a database of magnetic anomaly zones, and modern GPS systems automatically alert sailors when they're entering potentially dangerous waters. But the ocean is vast, and our mapping incomplete. Somewhere out there, new anomalies await discovery, and the next crew to encounter them might not be as fortunate as those who now benefit from the tragic lessons learned from the crew of Serendipity. For every sailor who dreams of blue water adventures, the message is clear. Respect the ocean's power, prepare for known dangers, but never forget that the sea's greatest threats are often the ones we haven't yet learned to fear. The water that looks so inviting, so safe, so familiar, may be hiding forces that can turn your own mind against you, making you an unwitting participant in your own disappearance. Their story lives on as a warning and a tribute. Three souls who ventured into the unknown and paid the ultimate price for expanding human knowledge of the sea's hidden dangers. In their final hours, as their brains betrayed them and they stepped confidently into 8,000 feet of open ocean, they thought they were walking to safety. Instead, they walked into legend, becoming part of the maritime lore that will guide and warn sailors for generations to come.